mandatory minority hiring, $1.78 billion to black and Latino workers. That's an executive decision. Why can't they be done against a $20 billion budget? Third, there's no reason why certain high school electives, non-essential courses can be converted to career and technical education courses. Then they can be made available in every high school. Fourth, we got 50 closed buildings. We need 50 adult ed and occupational training centers. In some communities, there are 4 or 5 times the number of men out of work than there are in the high schools. And fifth, we got to remove the mark of Cain that denies individuals who have done their time opportunities for jobs, opportunities for grants, opportunities for contracts. We've got to integrate them into the economy by giving them the training and opportunities that they deserve.
Lori Lightfoot.
You've heard a lot of good ideas from other candidates, but let me drill down a little more specifically. There are several things that the city can do today to really build wealth and have immediate impact. Number one, in the contracting space. I know from help running the city's procurement department that one of the biggest challenges small businesses have is access to capital. What the city can do and must do is go to banks and other financial institutions and compel them to lower the barriers to getting capital. Number two, in city contracting, we've got to break up the contracts so that small businesses, whether they're minority, whether they're women or otherwise, can get access to those city contracts. The city purchases about $2 billion every single year. We need to make sure that we're speaking our values in those contracts with city contractors. Just ask them, are you hiring small businesses? Are you doing diversity in your supply chain? And that's another way that we can bring wealth to black and brown neighborhoods. We also need to make sure that we create incubators for small businesses all over the city, not just downtown. And I'll agree with Paul. We have to make sure that our returning citizens have a real shot at an opportunity. I want to give a shout out to Kara and Safer as the sister of a person who spent much of his adult life incarcerated. If we do not build opportunities for them to reintegrate themselves into communities will continue to suffer. So that's something that the city can do right now.
Now we're going to go to John Kozlar.
Yeah, so in order to have an inclusive economic climate in Chicago, we have to have an inclusive city hall where we listen to our residents. It's been far too long where they continue to put all of us last and put themselves first. But the big things that I want to touch on, we have to prepare our youth for careers, and we're not doing that. We're not investing in our youth at an early age. And one of the ideas that I have is called Little Professionals League. And think of it, if we can have a Little League baseball, Little League softball, or Little League football, we can have Little League doctors, or Little League attorneys, or Little League carpenters. And we show the youth that, hey, there's another path in life outside of violence. And if we can change their minds at an early age, they will know that they are good people and that they deserve the best. But again, it comes down to investing in our youth. The other thing that we need to do is invest in our neighborhoods. And how do we support low-wealth small businesses? Instead of spending $10 million of additional revenue on the Riverwalk, we spend $10 million, like I said, on the south side. We need to all be treated fairly, but Chicago, this is on us. We are the ones that continue to empower our politicians who forget about the people. And we can change that in this election. This is the time. This is our time. And we can only do that by one vote at a time. Thank you.
Gary Chico.
Thank you very much. I am a small business owner with about 18 to 19 employees. I relish that. I enjoy working with the people that I work with. I have spent the majority of my professional career building projects in neighborhoods. The most recent one being in North Lawndale, which is north of Sinai Hospital. We took 10 acres and with Mayor Manuel's help enlarged the project area to be able to do 400 units of affordable housing, 150,000 square feet of office, and 20,000 square feet of retail. This is real, live stuff. It's not pie in the sky. But as I traveled around this entire city on Small Business Saturday, I see the excitement in Lincoln Park. Anybody see the excitement right now with Lincoln Yards? Where is it around the city? We need to bring it around the city. I saw pop-up retail. I saw all kinds of initiatives on Southport. I saw them all over this city, but so many communities are lacking this. I've walked on 47th Street just 2 weeks ago and met with 3 business owners that used the SPIF program. the Small City Grant Program to build restaurants, salons, and a candy store. It starts at the most basic level. We can do this, and we need to bring these resources down to the block level, every neighborhood.
Tony Preckwinkle.
As mayor, I'd like to take my experience working with the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership to bridge the divide between industries and communities on the south and west sides with high levels of unemployment. We have to remove the barriers to employment, including involvement in the criminal justice system, or lack of training or soft skills, by working with schools, community colleges, and community-based organizations that can provide wraparound services. That's why we work so hard to pass the bill in Springfield that expunges juvenile records. We as a city haven't done enough to make sure that residents have the resources to take advantage of their own gifts. We need to make it easier for people to build their businesses. We need to expand city programs to be sure that the people who are trying to start businesses have an opportunity to do so. And the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, which is a city program, is something we need to invest more in, as well as private efforts like the Chase Boston Consulting Group partnership that tries to bring capital to projects and projects to capital in under-resourced communities. We need to work to remove the barriers to starting, operating, and sustaining small businesses, and that means looking at the impact of city licenses, permits, and inspections, which are often cost prohibitive to entrepreneurs and small business owners.
Amara Enya.
So we will not achieve an inclusive economic city if we don't first address the economic justice issues in this city. So long as people are moving out of the city because they got tickets and they have filed for bankruptcy and they can no longer afford their vehicle to go to work, none of what we're talking about matters if we don't first address those structural issues that put the burden of sustaining the city on the backs of those who can least afford it. We have to do that first. And so I've put forth an economic justice platform that is built on progressive, productive, and non-punitive measures, like banning the boot, for example, to make sure that our working class families are not pushed out of the city because they can no longer afford it. That's first. Second, we have to think outside of the box in terms of the economic tools that we have. Many of you in here have worked with the Small Business Improvement Program, you've worked with SSAs. They are not addressing the issues of driving capital investment in our communities. I'm glad that Gary McCarthy has adopted the hallmark of my economic platform, which is a public bank, because it would allow us to not only fund our own infrastructure, but to provide those low-interest loans to entrepreneurs so that we can have many more business owners in the community. Moreover, those of you who work for organizations that have to voucher, you know if you don't have that money up front, you are out of luck. The city has to establish a fund to provide those funds up front, not only for business owners, but for your nonprofits, so that you can do the frontline work that you have been doing. Those are structural changes that need to happen first.
Thank you. I really appreciate the respect that the audience and the candidates are giving to this conversation, and I appreciate us continuing that. We're going to move on to the third question now, which is on immigration. What steps will you take to ensure that immigrants in Chicago, regardless of documentation status, are not only safe but thriving? And we'll kick this one off with Lori Lightfoot.
Well, we say that we're a welcoming city, but we haven't acted like a welcoming city. I think that one of the first things as mayor that I will do is this: get rid of the exemptions to the welcoming city ordinance. We can't have a gang database. We can't have the City of Chicago Police Department cooperating with ICE based solely on the signature of an ICE agent. And I will put on my former prosecutor's hat. One of the first things that I'm going to do is make sure that I sit down with the U.S. Attorney and the head of ICE here in Chicago and tell them what the rules of engagement are going to be in our city. We can't have a good, great city if parents fear leaving their homes, if parents can't take their kids to school without worried about being surveilled by ICE. That has to end in Chicago. We can't tolerate it. We don't have to tolerate it. If we have a leader and a mayor that I promise to be, that's going to stop here in Chicago. The other thing we have to do is we make sure that what I've done with, for example, the National Immigrant Justice Center. We need to make sure that those organizations that are on the front lines, that are providing services to our immigrant community, have the resources they need, both from the city and as mayor, making sure that philanthropic and business dollars flow to those organizations as well. And that's what I think we need to do for starters.
Dorothy Brown.
So we have to start with the idea that every human being deserves to be treated fairly and deserves to be treated like a human being. And so that means regardless of your status, you deserve to have a good education, you deserve to have good health care, you deserve to have all the rights of an American in this city of Chicago. So the first thing I want to do is to make sure that I have the office of New Americans. I'm going to continue the office of New Americans. I'm going to make sure that use that office to ensure that every city agency and even other businesses within the city are actually in strict compliance with accepting the IDs, the foreign IDs, the matricular IDs, the city key ID, so that, and also I want to make sure that from an educational standpoint, that when you take your child to any of our Chicago public schools, that you get accepted. And I'm going to make sure that we do not participate with ICE. I do not believe in the game the game listing either, and I want to make sure that we get rid of that game listing. People should not be on that game listing. The Chicago Police Department should not be using it. We have found the disparities in that, and so the important thing is that every citizen is treated fairly. And with the City Key program, since I have a little bit more time, with the City Key program...
Not really.
I don't have any more time. I'm out. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary Chico.
Thank you. My grandparents came from Mexico to this country to find a better life, and we wound up in the Stockyards area, working, and working some more, and that's what my brothers and I saw as we grew up. I've taken that entire experience and lived it in every position I've had, whether I've been in the public sector or the private sector. At the Chicago Public Schools, we built schools throughout this city, but we especially spent resources where there was overcrowding in the Hispanic communities. Kelly High School, building a new Orozco, several other places, Little Village High School, to try to relieve overcrowding and bring opportunity to everybody regardless of their status. We have legislation on the books right now, Sanctuary City, adopted by the City of Chicago. But I'll tell you this, it's not always being lived to. I held a press conference early in this mayoral race to show that the City of Chicago is spending money with the Gary Airport to deport 14,000 people a year. 14,000 people a year, and we called ourselves a sanctuary city. If we're really going to have legislation like this, and we're really going to mean it, then we have to live it.
Amara Enya.
So I come from an immigrant family that came to this country and drove taxi cabs to make it in this city, and are often left out of conversations when we talk about what it means to have sanctuary, especially the narrow discussions around what immigrants look like. When the fundamental reality is that they're human beings, they're residents, they're here. So we have to broaden the definition of sanctuary to make sure that we're not leaving out vulnerable populations because they don't have the same visibility as those who are typically at the forefront of these conversations. Sanctuary means that I can live in my neighborhood and be safe. I can go to a school. I can obtain work. I can go to a restaurant. If I don't have sanctuary right now in my neighborhood on the west side of Chicago, then how can we expect to have sanctuary for those who are coming here? If we don't address the structural issues in the city of Chicago so that sanctuary is a very real thing, then we're not really doing justice to immigrants coming here, nor to our existing residents. So yes, we have to eliminate carve-outs. I believe in the notion of sanctuary city. It's important, these are our residents, but we have to do a better job of ensuring that every single person who is within the bounds of Chicago has access to a job, has access to housing, has access to a quality education, their schools aren't getting closed, has access to parks and green space, is not exposed to public health hazards. That's what sanctuary means to me.
John Kozlar.
Yeah, Chicago is a city of immigrants. And for some reason over time it changed. But the things that we have to keep in mind is treating people fairly. We tend not to do that in the city, whether it's people who are here legally or illegally. If we can't take care of our residents in our neighborhoods, how are we going to take care of immigrants? We all have to work together. I don't feel that we should be breaking up families and having city resources to do that. I think it's a federal issue, but then again, I don't want to recruit people who are here criminally. We have a lot of criminals in Chicago, and people say, well, hey, let's keep everybody here. Well, if you're a criminal, I think that you should leave the city, whether you're here illegally or legally. And the other big part for me personally is investing, again, in our neighborhoods. And we have to invest in the sense of treating immigrants who are here as family members who are abiding by our rules, keep them intact, because there's a lot of good families who just want a pathway to fairness. And that's how I believe that we should be doing Chicago moving forward.
Tony Preckwinkle.
You know, the challenges that our immigrant communities face go beyond President Trump. Ironically, our present welcoming city ordinance allows the police department to work hand in glove with ICE. And we need a welcoming city ordinance that prohibits that, in which there are no exemptions. We can't have our police working in collaboration with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. These exemptions leave the undocumented living in fear and uncertainty. You know, if people are reluctant to call the police, it means that crimes go unreported and perpetrators go unpunished. Let me talk a little bit about the gang database. It has 128,000 people in it. 128,000 people. 11% of the entire African American community is in this gang database. 11%, and 4% of the Latinx community. And there are no criteria or guidelines for placement in the database. It's really arbitrary and capricious. People aren't informed they're in the database, nor is anyone ever seemingly taken out of it. The database is shared with ICE, it's shared with employers, it's shared with landlords, potentially causing great harm to the individuals who are on it. You know, we're being sued, and we ought to work with the plaintiffs to end the gang database.
Paul Vallis.
Thank you. Well, first of all, look, the issues that impact immigrants are issues of crime, issues of quality schools, issues of lead in the water, decaying infrastructure, affordable housing, and jobs. You know, so if you have a comprehensive initiative, if you're investing your resources in the type of things that improve conditions in the communities so that you have safe streets and that you have quality schools and that you have economic opportunities and you have affordable housing and you have, you know, you don't have draconian taxes and fees, then you address the issue of immigrants because you're addressing the issue of everyone in the community. But that said and done, when we were at CPS, Chicago Public Schools, we were a sanctuary school district. We treated every child and their family, regardless of their status. And we protected their privacy. And at the end of the day, it's that philosophy that we will bring and that I will bring to the city. In addition, we need to really support and empower those advocacy groups out there that are on the front lines that can do the best to advance and to